Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Icing on the Skate podcast. Yes, hello everybody. It's on a Tuesday, I know. You can thank that guy over there for it being today instead of yesterday, like it always is. Us as human beings, we don't like change, do we? But thanks, Chris. Much appreciated.
Not a problem.
So yeah, it's the end of the Elite League season. For those of you who may be tuning into the podcast for the first time, who have watched it later on when we've been streaming or have no idea what it is, this is our weekly podcast where we discuss the British League, the Elite Ice Hockey League, which is the top UK British League. We talk a little bit about the EIHL as well and some interesting things that happen there over the weeks. And we find some interesting stuff within the leagues in between throughout the hockey world. So we like to have a look and see interesting information and interesting stories, interesting discussion topics that we can find to have a look at. So, the Elite League. For those of you who don't know, the Elite League season ended this last weekend, just yesterday. The final games were played. And we are going to take a look at the results and have a little bit of a chat through what's happened. So, Chris, would you like to take us through the standings at the end of the regular season?
Yes, I'll make a change this time. I'll go from bottom to top, since the top's more exciting.
Good idea.
So, bottom of the league, in 11th place, the Milton Keynes Lightning, with a very, I would say commendable, but 34 points.
In 60 games?
In 10th place, it's the Dundee Stars with 58. Okay. In 9th, it's the Manchester Storm with 59. And then we're into the playoff spots. Ooh. In 8th, it's the Coventry Blaze with 62.
Called it.
I think we both did.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, called it.
In 7th, the Sheffield Steelers with 64. In 6th, the Five Flyers with 66. In 5th, the Guildford Flames with 67. In 4th, the Glasgow Clan, also with 67. In 3rd, Nottingham Panthers with 70.
Hey.
In 2nd, sorry Ben, the Cardiff Devils with 92. And in 1st, and the league champions, the Belfast Giants with 92.
So yes, the Belfast Giants are the 2018/19 Elite Ice Hockey League regular season champions. It came down to the very last game of the season. The Belfast Giants had to fight back from a noticeable deficit a couple of weeks ago. We were talking like, what, 8 to 10 points?
Yeah, I mean, what, it was what? A month, 6 weeks ago, we were like, Cardiff have got this in the bag. And then didn't Belfast win like 3 out of the 4 of those double headers they had, and they just brought them right back into it?
Exactly. Fair play to Belfast. Chris and I were talking about this as we saw the results come in. Like, fair play to the Belfast Giants team. They lost by a goal in the Continental Cup finals. They won the Challenge Cup over Guildford. And they, by the skin of their teeth, I think it was by 2 regular season wins or regulation wins.
Just the one.
Just the one. Just one regulation win difference between Belfast and Cardiff. And that means that the Cardiff Devils, unfortunately, couldn't make Elite League history with a three-peat of the regular season championship, which is a shame because it would have been nice to have seen history take place before our very eyes. However, I mean, the Belfast Giants, it's been a couple of seasons coming for this team. This team has gradually gotten better and better, and last year with the because they got the Challenge Cup last year, they got it again this year. You just knew that that they were going to compete for either the league championship or the playoff championship. So yeah, fair play to the Belfast Giants. They did a really good job this season. The cards were against them. The cards were stacked against them. I was trying to think of the right phrase there. But yeah, they managed to come back and get it. I mean, they had a record 45 wins. No, it was 2 regulation wins, I'm pretty sure. Or it was 2 wins in general. Because I can't.
It was 2 wins in general, but regulation was the best. Is the first tiebreaker, so they won it by 1 regulation in effect.
Yeah. So the Belfast Giants finished the year with 45 wins. Finished the season with a 4-game winning streak as well, and that's what powered them through to get the league championship. The Cardiff Devils finished with 43 wins on the season, less regulation losses. They gained more points in overtime. The Nottingham Panthers, I mean, if we're just going to run through all the different teams, the Nottingham Panthers, us as Panthers fans, we kind of hoped and expected for a little bit more. But, I mean, at the end of the season, 3rd place in the league, I'll take it, you know? Like, it's been a somewhat turbulent year for the Panthers this year. Not so much compared to some of the other teams, but considering they fired their head coach halfway through the season, like, to come 3rd place in the league, like, that's pretty impressive, you know?
You're forgetting that the Panthers have won silverware because they were the pre-season champions.
Oh, yes, of course.
They won the Aladdin Cup.
Oh, yeah, that cup that nobody cares about. They care less about that than they do the fucking Challenge Cup. And then you've got the Glasgow Clan and the Guildford Flames, a top 5 finish in the league. Fair play to Guildford. Like, that's awesome. You guys who watch the podcast regularly will know that I'm a huge fan of the Guildford Flames. They're like my underdog team. And I think 30 wins on the season. Paul Dixon has done a fantastic job with that team. So fair play to them. The Glasgow Clan, they shot up in the second half of the season. Unfortunately for them, they kind of shot themselves in the foot towards the last couple of weeks of the year. Went on a 6-7 game losing streak towards the end of the year, which kind of cost them 3rd place and that spot in the Continental Cup for next year.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you remember with Glasgow, once January the 1st hit, didn't they win like 13 out of 15 and just rocket up the league?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, they went from like 7th or 8th up to 3rd.
Yeah.
So quickly. Which, I mean, what's the name of the head coach again? Pete Russell, that's it. He's done a fantastic job with that team as well. We've seen some teams really surpass my expectations. I don't know about the expectations of everybody else, but they certainly surpassed my expectations. And then Fife, they had a good year. They started off the year very well. They cooled off as the year went along, but they did enough to take the to take a bottom half of the playoffs. The Sheffield Steelers, considering where they were at the beginning of the year, they have done fantastically well to take the 7th seed.
Yeah.
They were at the bottom of the league by a noticeable margin, like a month or two into the season. So fair play to Tom Barrasso to get that team to where they were. I mean, they managed to have a 30-win season. They had, at one point, I'm pretty sure they had like double the amount of regulation losses than they did wins. Like, that's how bad they were playing about a month or two into the season. So fair play to the Sheffield Steelers to get there. Tom Barrasso doesn't look like he's going to stay with the team long term, which is a shame, considering how he's turned that team around. But, yeah, fair play to the Steelers. And the Coventry Blaze, they had a couple of games in hand and they managed to make the best use of them, finishing the year on a 2-game winning streak to go 3 points up of Manchester to take the 8th seed in the playoffs. So the teams that made the playoffs are Belfast, Cardiff, Nottingham, Glasgow, Guildford, Fife, Sheffield and Coventry. And we'll go into more detail about the different playoff matchups and what our thoughts are on them a little later. That's our play under review for this week. But we've got a few other things to talk about first. Then if we just look at the teams outside of the playoffs, Milton Keynes, they're no longer in the Elite League after this season. They have, for the time being, played their last Elite League game for 2 years. Having played in the Elite League for the last 2 seasons. 15, 41 and 4 record for them. Finished the year on a 4-game losing streak. To be honest, they're a team that doesn't quite seem capable to stick in the Elite League. So
yeah, what we should point out, especially seeing as we've got some Canadians and some finishing, is that's not a relegation. They've opted to drop down. There is no relegation out of the Elite League. So they came bottom and they're not in the league anymore, but they haven't been relegated. They've opted to drop down.
Yeah, they've opted to drop down because they're A, not good enough to be up here, B, it's not financially stable for them, yeah. And C, there's a new second-tier league opening up in the UK for the start of next season, and that's where they're deciding to go, which I think is the right move for them, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then Manchester and Dundee. Manchester, considering the year they had last year, they had a real fall from grace. An under 500 team, the most penalty minutes out of any team. Finished the year losing. I can't remember who they played this last week, but a 1-game losing streak for them. And the Dundee Stars, I do kind of feel sorry for the Dundee Stars. They're one of the teams that they were only 4 points out of a playoff spot at the end of the season. And they're one of those teams that doesn't have the biggest budget. They don't have the biggest following. They don't have the biggest fans. But they will give you a game. They will make it competitive for you and make it difficult for you to take those 2 points home. So, commiserations to Manchester and Dundee. Their season is over. They won't take to the ice again until September, most likely. But for the other 8 teams, who we'll talk about in more detail later, they have made the playoffs. So looking at the player stats at the end of the season, I thought we've looked at them recently up until this week, and I thought it made sense to do it again. So Ben Lake was in the lead for points for pretty much the last month of the season. However, Belfast's Darcy Murphy managed to take it right at the end of the season. 2 points up on Ben Lake, 79 points in 58 games for Darcy Murphy this year, 39 goals, 40 assists, and only 20 penalty minutes as well, which is pretty impressive.
Well, I mean, Murphy's 4.9 against Dundee on their last game.
Yeah.
Alongside 2 points. So he got 6 points in the last 2 games of the season, which obviously helped a lot.
Oh, well, there you go. That's what sealed him the scoring title then for this season. Ben Lake got 77 points by the end of the year. 77 points in 60 games. I believe this was his first year in the league, so fair play to him. 34 goals, 43 assists. Charles Lingley of the Cardiff Devils took 3rd place in the scoring race with 21 goals and 54 assists for 75 points in 59 games. Mike Hammond took 4th. He was also the assist leader. Darcy Murphy was the leader in goals, by the way, by the end of the season as well. Mike Hammond, 18 goals and 57 assists for 75 points in 53 games, so tied 3rd. And in 5th place, Kyle Bourne of the Belfast Giants, 71 points in 60 games, which is pretty impressive. 28 goals, 43 assists. His first year over here, having left North America, and he did very well for the Belfast Giants. I wouldn't be surprised if he stuck with the team next year. So, yeah, we've got loads of players over a point a game. We're talking like the almost the top 20 scorers, almost a point per game. I mean, Tim Wallace, for example, the captain of the Milton Keynes Lightning, 57 points in 60 games. It just goes to show you that even the teams that were struggling this season had their success as well. You know, like they had players that were producing for them night in, night out, and he was the coach as well. He was a player coach, and then he took on the role of sort of more full-on coach as the season carried on. Now, in terms of goaltending stats, Tyler Beskorowany, see, I got it right first time. I told you. It'd take a little while, but I'd get there. He finished off the year as the best goaltender.
By the end of the season.
Yep. 42 wins, sorry, in 54 games. A .921 save percentage and a .225 goals against average, both of which I believe are the best in the Elite League this year. The interesting thing, and I just want a bit of clarification on this, Ben Bounds is in 2nd place, but supposedly he's played 60 games this season. That doesn't sound right, does it?
Well, that is potentially possible because there were 60 games.
Yeah, exactly, but I'm confused because surely he can't have played every single game this season.
Well, no, but don't forget that doesn't mean that he played the full game. He might have come in like just for the last period or something.
But for every single game this season?
Well, yeah. I mean, Shane Owen did the same.
Supposedly, Joel Rumpel of the Glasgow Clan played 59 games. Pontus Sjorgen of the Dundee Stars played 59 games. Matt Ginn of the Manchester Storm played 59 games. So we've got a lot of players that are suiting up pretty much every single game, which I find very strange.
But if you look at the minutes, if they played 60 games, that would be 3,600 minutes.
Yeah, true. Okay.
Plus or minus, empty net time and overtimes and stuff.
Fair play. But Ben Bounds, he played all 60 games. Beskorowany only played 54 games, by the way, to take the best goals against average and save percentage. But Ben Bounds, he had a 2.32 goals against average and a .916 save percentage in basically playing the entire season. So that's pretty impressive. Like, there's no wonder why he's the best Great British goaltender and the best goaltender arguably in the league this year. So yeah, fair play to him. So let's move on to some of the news that took place in the Elite League over this last week or so. We'll start with the oldest piece of news that came out quite literally the day after we decided to do last week's podcast.
As it always does.
Yeah, of course. And that's the announcement that Colin Shields, the current all-time leader in the Elite League in games played, goals, assists, and points, has decided at the end of this season he is going to hang up his skates and retire, which, I mean, was sort of, it was in the cards at some point within the next year or so, but he's decided to go out on a high. He announced this before the Belfast Giants won the league as well, so perfect timing on his end. He's going out with a potential Grand Slam. If they win the playoffs, they've won all 3 trophies this year.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what better way to go out for Colin Shields if they manage to do it?
Which, of course, we want them to do, because then Panthers get Continental Cup.
Exactly. So he's played 611 games. He's scored 245 goals, 390 assists for 635 points. Only 4 points above David Clark. But he's gone over a point per game in his entire career, which is crazy. And he posted something on the Belfast Giants website, basically a massive bit about about his thoughts on his career and where he's at in his life at the moment. I'm not going to read through the whole thing, but the last bit I do think is quite nice. He reads, "Ice hockey, I gave you everything and you didn't let me down. For that, I am forever grateful. Now let's enjoy these last few moments together." So I think that's really nice. Of course, Colin Shields is also a GB international. I can't quite remember if he's going to suit up for Team GB this year in the World Championships. Kind of hope he does. But I can't quite remember if he was named to the roster or not off the top of my head. Because now that he's announced his retirement, I can't quite remember if
I think he was. I would be surprised if he is on the roster and doesn't play, because surely he's not going to want at the end of his career to pass up the chance to play Canada and America. And
I think it'd be very interesting. If somebody does know the answer to that, do let me know. I'd be very interested to know. So yeah, Colin Shields has decided to announce his retirement, which I don't think is surprising to anybody, but at the same time, it's one of those things that now that you actually sit back and look at his career from the beginning, you go, wow, like, he had a run in the Elite Ice Hockey League. He is still playing for GB. Apparently he is, so great, okay, awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I think you would be mad to not...
Oh, exactly, absolutely.
You do not finish your career off that way.
Exactly, considering he played this year as well. Like, for example, if he retired last year and decided to come back because they were in the top flight this year, that might be a little bit more, oh, okay, I didn't quite realise that. But the fact that he's like, yep, I might finish this either winning 2 of 3 trophies or every single trophy in the Elite League this year, and then I'm going to go and see how well we do in the World Championship. So that's also...
Yeah, well, I mean, he says at the end of the season. Now, to me, the World Championships would be included in the season.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I get what you're saying. Of course, it's not included in the domestic season, but
no,
sort of
but
them
it's
playing
the ice hockey
their season as a whole. Absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, do you want to add anything on Colin Shields, Chris? Is there anything you want to say on him?
I mean, he's done great for ice hockey. He's going to continue, as he said in his statement. He's going to he hopes he's going to be able to continue to be involved in the off-ice part of the Giants.
I wouldn't be surprised if he got a front office or a coaching job there.
No, but obviously you get to the point where you think, I could get seriously injured here, and
oh yeah.
So it's a good time. I mean, he's done it all in the Elite League.
Oh, absolutely.
So he can't complain. It would be great if they finish off with the Grand Slam.
Definitely. I think for the Belfast Giants, a team that's kind of been so close yet so far for the last sort of couple of seasons, maybe even more than that, it would just be really, really nice to see a guy like Colin Shields, his swan song in the league, to go, here we go, I'm going to win, get the Grand Slam, get all 3 trophies, and then I think that's the perfect time to finish a career. It's like who is it? Ray Bork, for example, winning the Stanley Cup in his final season in the NHL. Like, it's just one of those things that if they didn't do that, they'd be spending the rest of their life going, what if? And you really, you like, whether it's you or it's happening to somebody else, you just hate to see those what if scenarios.
Maybe I should have played just one more year.
Exactly. But then at the same time, it's like, but I didn't have much left in me. I gave everything I could to the sport. So it would have been tough for me, and I probably wouldn't have been the same player that I was over the last however many years. So the real question is, do you think Colin Shields will get his number retired by Belfast?
If I was Belfast, I would say it was inevitable.
Absolutely, I agree. I'm saying absolutely, I agree. I think it's the right thing to do. He's put so many years. I don't quite have his entire career and where he played up at the moment, but he spent either all of or a very large chunk of his career with the Belfast Giants organisation.
It was a very large chunk. He did move somewhere else for like a season and a half, something like that.
Okay.
And then went back. But I mean, from my point of view, it's a jersey retirement and British Hockey Hall of Fame without question.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, he'll definitely go into the British Hockey Hall of Fame. If David Clark made it in there, then Colin Shields absolutely will.
Yeah, you've got to, haven't you? Right, Colin Shields. Let's have a look.
We'll probably have a news article to mention next year that basically says the people that decided going, this was the easiest decision we had to make.
Yeah. So so he played abroad. He was he played for the University of Maine quite a bit, and
right. So he's in the NCAA.
He came over to Belfast in 2005. Right. Okay. The 05-06 season he was at Belfast. He then went over to the ECHL.
Oh, okay.
For a season, came back to the Elite League for the Newcastle Vipers.
All right, okay.
Went back to Belfast 08-09, stayed there for the rest of his career, apart from a season in France in 11-12,
okay,
and 22 games for the Steelers at the start of the 12-13 season.
Interesting. Okay. So, like, the majority / a large chunk of his career he spent with this organisation. It's not as if he played the first 5 years there, which is a large chunk of his career, and then move on. He started there, left, came back, left, came back again. So, yeah, I think it's inevitable that Colin Shields will get his jersey retired by the Belfast Giants. I think it's the right thing to do, and I think the fans will be wanting it. So why not do it,
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the news of Colin Shields retiring from the sport of hockey, or playing the sport of hockey, at the end of this season, or at the end of the World Championships, we would imagine. Now, the Department of Player Safety reared its ugly head again this last week.
Everybody's favourite place.
Now, the interesting thing is, while I was looking up this recent suspension on Nottingham Panthers defenseman Janen Rissling, excuse me. This is the first suspension that the DOPS have handed out in exactly a month.
Okay.
Their previous suspension was Alex Nikiforuk on February 27th, 2019. This one took place on March 27th, 2019. First of all, Elite Ice Hockey League, you need to spell check your articles. You've called him Janen Rissling in the title of the article. Might want to spell check that before we begin. But yeah, so Janen Rissling, the defenseman of the Nottingham Panthers, was suspended for 2 games for he got a major penalty and game misconduct for a check to the head on a Fife Flyers player, I believe. Was it a Fife Flyers player? I believe it was, wasn't it? Barry McKenzie. Yeah. I've watched it. Chris showed it to me. I am quite surprised he didn't get more than 2 games. First of all, because of the actual hit he made. Essentially, he took the player down onto the ice. McKenzie was either falling to the ice or he was sort of laying down, hunched over on the ice, and he basically gave him a cross-check to the head. The thing that confuses me is the fact that he is a repeat offender this year. He's missed, I think he had a 3-game suspension and a 6-game suspension earlier this year. And yeah, he only got 2 games for this, which kind of surprises me considering the severity of it. If you want to go and watch it, go and check out the Department of Player Safety's article on it on the Elite League website. I think most of you would agree that this is worth more than 2 games. As a Panthers fan myself, and as Chris is a Panthers fan, we're more critical of the Panthers more than anyone else. That's the best way for a sports fan to be, in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, 2 games for that is bloody hell. That's rough. What do you think, Chris?
Of all of the decisions that the Department of Player Safety has made over the course of the season that we have spoke about, we've critiqued, we've analysed. This is the most absolute ridiculous, crazy, what the hell were they on when they decided it, decision of the season.
Absolutely.
How this is only 2 games, I have absolutely no idea.
So, just for context, in terms of the bigger picture, to be honest, the maximum they could have given him was, what, 4 games? 5 games? Because, the reason I say that is because the suspension that he was handed out, he missed the last game of the season against the Guildford Flames. He misses the first leg of the playoff quarterfinals. You then have the second leg of the playoff quarterfinals,
which is against Fife.
Exactly. Finals weekend, the first game, and then you have either the third place or the final game. So there's only 5 games he could have potentially played in. So I guess they were trying to say we don't want to make too much of a have him missing the rest of the season because that would impact the Panthers too much. But at the same time, if he needs to be suspended 5 games, which I wouldn't have been surprised if he did. No. They should have suspended him 5 games, you know?
Yeah, I don't see how a cross-check to the back of a guy's head who's lying on the ice is only 2 games. I really can't. And like I don't get it.
Like we were saying when Chris and I first saw this, the main thing we mentioned was he's a repeat offender. Yeah. Like we know that every time the Department of Player Safety put up an update on a suspension for a player, there's always people, whether it be Twitter or Facebook, to go, "Oh, the Department of Player Safety is a joke. Oh, they can never. There's no consistency. It's ridiculous." And most of the time, you're like, "Yeah, whatever. Like they've made the right call." This one, I agree with you, Chris. Like this one was reckless. So they say it was under Category 2 of reckless, a deliberate and/or dangerous action with no concern for the result. I think that describes Jaden Rissling's actions perfectly. And the fact that he had a 6-game suspension earlier in the season. When Chris and I initially talked about this, I think we tallied up the amount of games that he'd missed this season. We're talking like a third of the season. He'd missed like 20 games.
Yeah, it was something... Yeah, it was... I mean, it was what, a 6 and a 5 and now a 2. That's 13. So you're at least at like a quarter of the season pretty much.
Yeah, exactly. He's missed like a quarter of the season due to suspension. If that was due to injury, that's a different thing. Because it's like, well, you know, injuries happen in hockey. Sometimes players just get bad luck. I mean, the Panthers have had their fair share of injuries like any other team this year. But it's due to suspension. It's due to stuff that he could have an impact on and could have stopped. But he didn't, and he hoped he could get away with it. And it's shown 3 times now he can't. To be honest, as a Panthers fan, seeing what he did, that should have warranted at least a 4 or 5 game suspension.
Did you watch the build-up to it, or did you just watch what I sent you?
To be honest, I only just watched what you sent me to see the initial build-up, but it does explain it in the article written by the Department of Player Safety, if you want to look at it properly. So, feel free to explain.
The build-up was completely nothing.
Yeah.
There was nothing in it. The guy skated around him. There was a bit of a flailing arm, but nothing, you know, not in the face or anything. It just slightly tapped his chest, and he just lost it.
Yeah.
Put the guy on the ice and cross-checked him to the back of the head. And I mean, that's the back of your head is the most vulnerable part, with or without a helmet.
Well, yeah, I mean, like any checks to the head, especially with the advancements and the greater understanding of how concussions and CTE works nowadays, it's just an absolute no-go area. Absolutely. Like, you cannot aim for the head under any circumstance, because you will end up either paying the price from their teammates or from the Department of Player Safety. So, yeah, I think it's crazy. I think it's absolutely ridiculous that he got 2 games. I am planning to go back and watch it again just to make sure I agree with what I've said here. Because I don't like to do it based on sort of just trying to remember what happened. But looking at the video that Chris sent me, it was a clear cross-check. The player was already down on the ice, and he went, "You know what, I'm going to give you one more whack." And that's what got him the 2-game suspension by the looks of it. So, yeah, I think it's ridiculous. Like I say, as Panthers fans ourselves, the Panthers are my primary team in the Elite League. They're the team I follow the most in the league. We critique them more than any other team because that's the right thing to do. Like, we show our bias in the opposite way. We will critique and take the piss out of and lambast our favourite team more than the other teams in the league to show that we're trying to be as equal as possible. You know, like, we could just be like, oh, but he's on our favourite team, so it doesn't matter. But that's not right, you know? He cross-checked a guy in the head when he was already on the ice. That deserves a much longer suspension than just 2 games. Especially because he's a repeat offender. Oh my God, like, how difficult is it?
Yeah, for the 3rd time, not just the 2nd.
For the third. Exactly. He's a repeat offender. So, just before we move on to the next thing, there was a little thing that Chris sent me earlier in the week that I just wanted to mention.
Was there?
The Team GB women's hockey.
Oh, yeah.
They are currently playing in the World Championships. I believe the first game is being shown on Free Sports. It was either shown earlier or it's just started. So if you've really had enough of us and you want to go watch it on Free Sports, feel free. If not, stay with us. They came out with the captaincies.
See if I can find it.
Yeah, go for it. They announced their captaincies for the World Championships in Dumfries this week. Saffron Allen was given Saffron? They spelt it wrong again. What is wrong with all these places not spell checking what they write? Saffron Allen has been named the captain of the GB women's team. Jodie Bloom and Kim Lane were appointed as the alternate captains. I've got to be honest, I don't really keep much tabs on the women's hockey compared to the Elite League. It's just not as shown compared to the other team. We of course talked about them last week. We've got some more women's hockey to talk about later on in the podcast. But yeah, so if you're interested in that, feel free to go and check it out.
They're 4 minutes into the first period. It's still 0-0. This is the Australia. It's the World Championship Division 2A.
Right. Okay.
So they're in a group with some really good hockey countries.
Well, then again, we're not.
Well, so they've got Mexico.
Hey.
Oh, some of these countries I won't call ice hockey countries, but yeah. So there's
but then again, that's how the rest of the world looks at us. You know.
Well, that is true. That is true.
So...
Yeah. It's Mexico. Mexico beat North Korea by 4-2.
Ah. Just the dream matchup there.
Spain beat Slovenia by 4-3 in overtime.
Okay, Slovenia is sounding like the most hockey country out of them all so far.
Yep. And then it's Great Britain and Australia.
I see. Okay, nice. So before we get to our play under review, we're moving on now, by the way. Before we got to our play under review, some of you might remember if you've been watching the podcast from the very beginning.
Which you should have been.
Which you should have been. I mean, if you weren't subscribed to the channel, I'll let you off. But if you were, where you've been, we made some predictions based on the Elite League. Right before the Elite League started, or just as the Elite League season started, Chris and I sat down on one of the first, if not the first, episode of the podcast.
And I kept the piece of paper.
And Chris has kept the piece of paper of our predictions. So,
we're
going to go through our predictions and see how many we got right or wrong. Now, before we came on the stream, I asked Chris, how did we do? And he said that I did a lot better than him, but we both did pretty bad.
You did okay. You did all right. You did all right. Okay, so top of the table, you were torn on this one.
Yes.
You couldn't decide between the Panthers and the Giants.
Yep.
I went with the Panthers.
So, go through each category, say which one we chose, and then the actual answer. Go for it. You're pretty much doing that anyway, but yeah, just go for it.
Okay, so first, I said Panthers, you said Giants or Panthers because you couldn't decide. It was, of course, the Giants.
So, I got one technically right.
Yep.
I mean, that's enough for me to close up shop, you know?
Yeah. Second place, I said Giants, you said Devils. It was the Devils.
Hey!
Third place, I said Devils, you said Panthers.
Oh my God, I'm doing great. Oh, I'm so good at this.
Fourth place, I said Sheffield, you said Sheffield.
Okay, yeah, we'll forget about
Went
that
a bit
one.
downhill.
Yeah, I mean, that's Sheffield's fault, though, you know?
Yeah.
Blame Tomo.
Challenge Cup. I said Cardiff. You said Panthers.
Oh, that was shit, wasn't it?
Playoffs obviously haven't happened yet.
Yep.
I said Panthers. You said Steelers.
I mean, they're in it, so
Yeah,
never say
both teams are in it.
Never say never.
This is, to be honest, where it does start to go a bit downhill for me.
Okay, right. What about me?
Not great either, but
I didn't
better
think
than
it would
me.
be, because we're now talking more like the bottom of the table, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dark horse of the season.
Okay. Go on.
You can see where this is going, can't you?
Yeah.
So I said Milton Keynes.
Of course you did. How'd that turn out, Chris?
Yeah, pretty good.
Pretty 34?
34 points more than the Lions, that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, 34 more than the Lions.
You said Guildford.
Okay.
Which, I'll give you that.
To be fair, dark horse of the season, that's quite a subjective thing. I mean, it's quite clear that you definitely got yours wrong.
They finished what? 5th? I'll give you dark horse at 5th.
I mean that's just under the top half of the league.
Well, they only lost out on 4th on games won.
Yeah,
so
I'll take that. I mean, I could have better. Glasgow would have been the best answer, I think. But
yes,
I think Guildford is a good second.
Yes.
So,
okay.
Yeah, I'll take that.
Right, then we get to best signing.
Best signing. Oh. Now I have a feeling one of us said Rich Chernomaz.
Yes, we did. Yes.
Let me guess. It was you.
Yes, it was. Oh dear.
Yeah, that one didn't turn out very well, did it? Considering he left halfway through the season. I love looking back at these things.
I can remember because obviously we did this at the end of the pre-season when we'd won every single pre-season game.
Yeah.
And he was like the god amongst men.
Oh, hindsight is always 20/20.
Oh, it so is. You said Luke Pither.
Okay, yeah, because I said that based on his production with the Panthers the half of the season before when he came over. I mean, I could have chosen better. I think somebody like Charles Lingley would have been a good choice there. Somebody like Ben Lake for the Coventry Blaze, second in scoring. Kyle Bourne of the Belfast Giants. However, Luke Pither, he did have a pretty decent season, from what I can remember. He was one of the last players of the week this season. I think it wasn't last week, but the week before. He had a pretty good year, but I mean, I could have chosen better. I think Alex Guptill would have been better if we were talking specifically Panthers. But yeah, I mean, he was an alright signing. I'll take it. It's better than Rich Chernomaz.
Right, and then we come to bottom of the league.
Okay.
Now, we couldn't actually decide here, so we gave ourselves 2 each.
Okay. Now, I'm pretty sure I remember, I said one of them was going to be... I think I said Milton Keynes or Coventry, I'm pretty sure.
You said Coventry or Glasgow.
Oh. That was very far off. I mean, Coventry closer than Glasgow, but yeah, both of them made the playoffs, so I was way off on that one.
Yep. I said Glasgow and Dundee.
Okay, so you were close on Dundee.
I was still not great, but slightly closer than you.
To be fair, I remember when we did these predictions, we had a real tough time trying to figure out which one we'd go for there. Because, of course, it was pre-season, and we hadn't really seen much of some of the other teams in the league yet. Because only some teams play pre-season games. So, yeah. I mean, we were both a little bit off on that one. You were closer than I was, but, yeah, fair play. Was that
so
all
there
of
we
them?
go. That's all of them. Yeah, that's all we did.
If you forget, like, the last half of mine, I did all right.
Yeah. I mean, we both got... Well, you got, obviously, the top 3 spot on.
Yep.
I got the top 3 right, but in the wrong order.
Yeah, pretty much.
Neither of us did well in the Challenge Cup. The playoffs, of course, we don't know yet.
Nope.
So, yeah.
And best signing and dark horse, I did relatively okay. Could have done better, could have done worse. And you were way off the ball there.
Yeah, I couldn't really have done much worse, could I?
There. Milton Keynes and Rich Chernamaz. Bloody hell.
Oh, dear.
So that was a look back at our initial pre-season predictions for the 18-19 Elite Ice Hockey League season. Oh, they were interesting. We definitely have to do them again next year and just see how awfully we do. So now we move to our play under review. For those of you who have never watched this podcast before, this is the section where we take a specific topic in either the Elite League, but primarily in British hockey as a whole, and we discuss we have more of a debate about it, but it's just kind of a little bit more of what we always do, just not necessarily Elite League. However, this week it is Elite League, because the only real big thing we need to talk about is the playoffs. So the season ended 2 days ago, at the end of March, and we have our playoff matchups decided. So
we do.
What was it? Quarterfinals. The quarterfinal matchups.
Quarterfinals.
Yes, quarterfinal matchups for the 2019 Elite League playoffs. We have the Belfast Giants against the Coventry Blaze, which is the first seed versus the 8th. We then have the Cardiff Devils against the Sheffield Steelers, which is the 2nd seed versus the 7th. We have the Nottingham Panthers against the Fife Flyers, which is the 3rd seed against the 4th. No, hang on, that's not right. They've put Fife as 4th. No, Fife as 6th, aren't they?
No, what are you looking at?
I'm looking at the Elite League website.
I'm looking on Flash Scores, which has it right.
Fife is 6th, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the Elite League's fault. Go check their article. It says Nottingham 3, Fife 4, and Glasgow 4, Guildford 5. So I'm 100% it's their fault.
5-6.
They suck. So the Nottingham Panthers, 3rd seed against the Fife Flyers, who are the 6th seed, and the 4th seed Glasgow Clan against the 5th seed Guildford Flames. So the way that this is done, it's a home and home. Whoever scored the most goals by the end of it goes through to the playoff finals weekend, which is in 2 weeks?
Yes. It's a week on Saturday.
Next week,
so the ties for the quarterfinals are to be played this Saturday and this Sunday. That's the 6th
sorry, you're right.
7th.
Yeah, I've just seen that now.
So Saturday is in Coventry, Guildford, Sheffield, and Fife, and then Sunday is in Belfast, Glasgow, Cardiff, and Nottingham. The winner on the aggregate score over those 2 legs goes through to finals weekend. Belfast, of course, being the top seed, have the easier, in inverted commas, run-in, so they will play the winners of Glasgow or Guildford if they beat Coventry, of course, whereas Cardiff and Sheffield will play Nottingham or Fife. And then, obviously, Belfast have the, as I said, easier running because they avoid the 2nd and 3rd seed until the final, potentially.
Which is the way it should be done.
Yes.
If you're listening, NHL. Have the best teams face off later on because you want to see the best set of hockey nearer the finals.
They always used to do it like that, didn't they? Before they brought this wild card in.
And then they changed it to this wild card bollocks or whatever. So these are the 4 different matchups. 8 of the 11 teams make it to the playoffs from the Elite League this year. They did 8 of 12 teams last year, didn't they? So it's the same. It's just one less team in the league, one less team misses out on the playoffs, essentially. And then when they get to playoff finals weekend, we have the 2 semi-finals, the finals, and the 3rd place game, and they're all 1 game, winner takes all, essentially.
Yes, so the 2 semi-finals are on Saturday.
Yeah.
Then the 3rd place game is at something like midday on Sunday, with the final at like 4 or 5, I think it is.
So, let's have a little chat about each bracket, shall we, Chris? So, where would you like to start? Bottom of the table, top of the table?
No, let's start at the top and work our way down.
So, Belfast versus Coventry, the 1st seed versus the 8th seed. We can make our predictions, or let's have a little chat about them first, and then make our predictions towards the end. Or like a wrap-up of our predictions once we've talked about all of them. So, Belfast and Coventry, what are your initial thoughts about this bracket?
Your initial thoughts are, well, Belfast should win.
Yep.
However, we saw what Coventry did to Cardiff on Sunday.
Mm.
And I wouldn't really, well, I wouldn't like to call it as a certainty. Coventry, they can do damage. They really can.
Yeah.
Um,
Which I
I
think, to be
mean,
fair, can be said about every single team in the playoffs
well,
this
yeah. I
year.
mean, if you look at the final standings, it's like 5 points separates third from eighth or
Yeah,
fourth from
exactly.
ninth, something like that.
It's that close this year. It
Anybody,
really
I
is.
mean, the pick of the ties for me, obviously in that first round, is Cardiff Sheffield.
Yeah, that's going to be a fantastic series. That's going to be
Um,
fun.
yeah, I mean the Cardiff Sheffield because like Sheffield, okay, they've not had a good season, but you can't count them out.
Yeah,
Nottingham
especially
Five
come the
have a
postseason.
Nottingham Five have a rivalry that goes back 50 odd years.
Exactly.
Glasgow Guildford being fourth and fifth, I mean 60 games they could only be separated by like a regulation time win.
It's the two dark horse teams of the season going up at it,
You
essentially,
just
isn't it?
Yeah, it could be any combination of those.
Yeah, quite literally it could be like we. I say this every week. We've said this so many times throughout the season. That the quality of the competition between 10 of the 11 teams has been so close that this season, more so than any other season, of course we say this every single week because it is the case. It's so difficult to predict who's going to win a game. Of course you have the team that's more likely to win and you go, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. However, when a team upsets, like when a Coventry upsets a Cardiff or a Belfast, you're like, oh, okay, yeah. I mean, it's not that outside of the realm of possibility, So, I mean, like you said, I think it's Belfast. Like Belfast, if things go to plan and they play like the Belfast Giants should, it shouldn't be that difficult for them. However, I wouldn't be surprised if it was a 1-goal differential.
No.
I wouldn't be surprised if it was a 5-goal differential, if Belfast just steamroll through the Coventry Blaze, because the Belfast Giants have been known as a team this season to steamroll through lower teams in the standings and weaker opponents. Not to take anything away from the Coventry Blaze, but they're the 8th seed for a reason.
The key for Coventry in that matchup is that they have got to go back to Belfast tied or in front.
Yeah.
They cannot go back to Belfast down, and there has been... Oh, okay. I was about to say there's been a goal and Great Britain women are in front, but then, like, literally a few seconds later, Australia have equalised.
Oh, great. But that's a good point that you mentioned, actually, because that reminds me of the Challenge Cup semi-finals. Belfast-Glasgow. Glasgow had, I think, they either had a 1-goal lead or a...
There were 2 goals up going into the second leg, and Belfast just walked over them at home.
I mean, yeah, exactly. So they really need to sort of establish their dominance, because Coventry are playing at home for the first leg, right?
Yes.
So they really need to establish their dominance early on in the game if they want to have any sort of success against the Belfast Giants. I think, though, what might work in Coventry Blazers' favour is they've been out of the playoffs, sort of bouncing in and out of the playoffs for a while. They're kind of a team that doesn't really have anything to lose. Like,
no, they don't. That's true.
They're the 8th seed. They made it in basically by the skin of their teeth. Belfast are going for the Grand Slam. Like, I mean, to be honest, if they didn't win the playoff championships, it wouldn't be the end of the world. But they've got the chance to do something only a couple of teams have ever done in Elite League history and win every single trophy this season. So Coventry Blaze might use that and be like, you know what, we could really cause an upset here, which is exactly what they did to Cardiff this weekend.
Yeah, but at the same time, obviously, they're coming up against a Belfast side who have come in hot at the end of the season.
Yeah, very
winning.
true.
Didn't you say they were on like a 4-game winning streak to take the title?
Yes.
Coventry, though, of course, won back-to-back games to get into the playoffs because they beat Manchester 4-1. That's what got them in there, and then they shocked Cardiff.
Exactly. Like, I feel like this Coventry Blaze team, they play their best hockey when their backs are against the wall.
Yeah.
Like when they're facing playoff elimination. It's like the head coach. The head coach is Danny Stewart, right? I believe that's right. He came out like 2-3 weeks before the end of the season, was like, we need to really step up our game here because we're playing for our playoff lives at the moment. And they stepped up and they did it.
Go for it. I was going to say, if you look at Coventry's season broken down by the teams they've played, because I know that they lost to Milton Keynes 5 times this season.
Yeah.
Yet, they beat Cardiff and whatever. They play better against the teams that they're the underdogs for.
Absolutely, yeah. They embrace that underdog role. Great. The only concern, or the main concern I have for the Coventry Blaze is they're a very top-heavy team. Their top 6 is relied on, or their first forward line is relied on to do a lot of the work on the score sheet.
Yeah.
You can see that just looking at the final point scorers. I'll see if I can bring it back up just to give you a bit of context. But they have several players sort of quite high up in the scoring list, or the top scoring list at the end of the season. But then the drop off is quite huge. They're kind of like the Colorado Avalanche of the Elite League this year. like their top line is incredibly impressive, but then you've got, like, for example, Ben Lake was second with 77 points, Tim Crowder 68 points, Alex Nikiforak 68 points. Like, you've got 3 players in the top 10 or 11 in scoring, and then there isn't one until like 34 in the point scoring race. So there's a noticeable drop off between their top group of players and the rest of their players, which of course is to be expected to an extent, because not every single player for you is going to score a point every night. However, compared to a team like Belfast that have point scorers basically everywhere, and they have solid goaltending, basically the best goaltender in the league this year, not including Ben Bounds, they've got a solid team there, and Coventry might struggle against a more complete team, a more well-rounded team in Belfast. So yeah, I think that's going to be essentially whichever team sets their game plan early, I think will take the series. If Belfast come in and assert their dominance as the league winners, they'll get it. If Cardiff come in with a chip, I've got connection to the internet. I'm not quite sure. Okay, right. Are we back? Are we back?
Maybe.
Okay, I think I'm back. I mean, my power did cut out today, so I'm not surprised that something like this has happened. We managed to go almost an hour with... Right, I think we're back. Sorry about that, guys. My OBS just decided to kill itself for a minute. It's back now, I think. So we got to the Devils and the Steelers in the conversation, right? So the Sheffield Steelers had a much better second half of the season. The Cardiff Devils, to an extent, bottled it at the end of the year. I mean, I don't think bottled it is the right phrase. They couldn't quite close it out, I think is the phrase I want to use. They weren't clutch when they needed to be. They were for the rest of the season, but when it came to the last 3 or 4 games, they lost it. So, once again, I know it's so shit to use the same sort of reasoning behind more than one series, but I could see this one going either way. Do Cardiff play like the team that they've been for nearly the whole season, or do they carry on the success of, or carry on how they've played the last week or so? Do Sheffield, they've got a massive chip on their shoulder as a team that's really failed on their expectations compared to what they were hoping for this year. I don't think that's unfair to say. They've got a tough matchup. I think Sheffield could maybe upset Cardiff more so than Coventry could upset Belfast, but I think it's going to be a tough slog. What do you think, Chris?
I agree with what you're saying that, Cardiff have, I mean, like you say, they've not bottled it, but they struggled to get over the line.
Yeah.
A few weeks ago when I did that breakdown of the run-ins, and we said that Belfast have got way more games at home and they've got the better run-in.
Yeah.
I still think that Cardiff will have this.
Yeah.
To be honest. I still think Cardiff will have it.
I agree. Because, I mean, we've seen the last few years, they've been pretty clutch in the playoffs. I mean, we had Cardiff-Sheffield final 2 years ago, Cardiff-Sheffield final last year, I'm pretty sure. And then we've got Cardiff-Sheffield in the quarterfinals. So, one of the teams has got to go out. And the only thing I would say in Sheffield's favour is when the spotlight is its brightest, they turn up. Like, early in the season, they didn't do very well, but when it came to clinching a playoff berth, they're there. When it comes to trying to get through to playoff finals, they always find a way to do it. When they're down in the playoff final game, they find a way to come back, you know? Like, I do agree with you that I think Cardiff is going to take this one, but it's so tough to count Sheffield out.
It is.
You could argue that the turbulent season they've had this year might sort of influence whether they're clutch this year or not. But especially at home, the Sheffield Steelers always find a way. So I wouldn't be surprised. Then we move on to the Panthers and the Flyers. I think this one will go the Panthers' way. And the reason I say this is because, I mean, the Fife have played, because Nottingham and Fife played, what, 2 days ago? They played Saturday, didn't they? Or the week before?
It was the week before, because that was when Riesling got suspended.
You're right, yeah, they played the week before. I can't remember the final score of that game.
I think Fife won. Hang on, I'll check it.
I think it was an overtime loss.
I
think Fife won in overtime.
Yes, they did. They did. I remember that because it was on the 17th. Because I went to the Lions and everyone started flooding out because they'd lost.
Yeah.
I think 5 won in overtime.
I think this will be a 1-goal aggregate game, a series. I really do. I think if out of all of them, I think this one's with this one, I'm the most sure that it's going to be a 1-goal aggregate. I could be completely wrong, and one team could come out and demolish the other one. Of course, that's how sports work. But yeah, I really think these two teams, they play very well against each other. They both play very well against each other, you know. It's not as if like a Belfast-Coventry where Belfast are dominant, or a Cardiff-Sheffield where Cardiff, for the most part, have had Sheffield's number this year. The Panthers and the Five Flyers, they've chucked about wins and losses to each other all season, really. And like you said, they've got this half-a-century history with each other. That they've got a lot of bad blood between these two teams. Add Jane and Rissling in these last few weeks. He's gonna come back for Game 2 of this series. And I would not be surprised if he had to drop the gloves within the first period to sort of clear that bad blood and clear the air, you know. But to be fair, the Panthers, I think, if they did make it past Fife, they could have a decent route to the playoff finals. Because they've had Cardiff's number for most of the season, if Cardiff made it through. I think if Nottingham and Cardiff made it through, whilst I wouldn't count Cardiff out, they're the higher seed and the better team, I think, overall, Nottingham could make it to the finals. If it was Nottingham-Sheffield, I'd have Sheffield. Sheffield have had Nottingham's number all year.
They have.
The Nottingham have played so badly against Sheffield every single game this season, bar from the pre-season, I'm pretty sure. And we all know how that has an influence on the results in the regular season, doesn't it? What do you think about this series?
Yeah, it's interesting. Again, I would lean more towards Fife if they hadn't gone so downhill towards the end.
Yeah, fair.
And the thing with the Panthers that you can never count against them is that they've always been, for years since I've been following the Panthers, they've been this kind of one-game specialist.
Yeah.
Where you get a playoff game and they can just, I think it was a few years ago, they were like 3 goals down against Braehead after the first leg. Came back to win it. I mean, they were what? They were what? 3 goals down against Belfast with something like 8 minutes to go.
Exactly what I was going to say. Like even last year, like that. I think that's the last Elite League game I've been to. And like they were a couple 3 goals down with like half of the third period left to go, and they managed to tie it and win it in overtime. Like that was the second leg, and that was at home in Nottingham. So you know, like I think Nottingham and Sheffield, like they've both got that reputation as clutch playoff teams. Like you said, when it comes to all or nothing, everything on the table, one game does it. They know how to do it, except if they're up against a team like Sheffield.
Yeah,
like when those two titans go at it, it's usually Sheffield that find a way, especially these last few seasons, you know.
Yeah. End of the first period in the World Championships, Australia 0, Great Britain 1.
Oh, okay, so Australia, they had their goal disallowed or didn't score?
I don't know. I mean, no, Flash Scores said they'd scored, and then a minute ago they said, correction, it's only one. It's still 1-0. So
either they made a mistake or the goal's been disallowed. Fair enough.
Yeah, and the Great Britain's women's account says it's 1-0 at the end of the first. Okay. So.
And then the last bracket, of course, Glasgow versus Guildford.
Not the foggiest.
I have no idea. I would love Guildford to make it. I'm rooting for Guildford in this one. Like, this is probably, as an Elite League fan in general, you kind of want both teams to make it to the playoff finals. I mean, Guildford made it to the Challenge Cup finals, and they lost to Belfast in overtime. And Glasgow, they had a resurgent second half of the season. Both teams, they struggled last year. Well, Glasgow struggled more last year, and more so at the beginning of this season. The Guildford Flames, they're known as one of the teams with the lowest budget, the lowest sort of fan base. They're because they came up through an expansion of the league. They're kind of one of those underdog teams that we don't quite know what they're going to do, and you kind of expect them to be a basement dweller like Milton Keynes for the first few years until they get their feet and everything. But they've managed to surpass all expectations in the last 2 seasons. I go on about Guildford all the time. I'm aware that I do it a lot on this podcast, but I mean, the results speak for themselves. They're the number 5 seed. They beat out Fife, Sheffield and Coventry. Like, those are teams that have... Like, Coventry, they've had loads of success in the Elite League, as have Sheffield, and Fife are a team that have been around for, like, 100 years. You know, like, the Guildford Flames, the fact that they're beating teams like this is incredibly impressive. And they're a team that you never know what they're going to do on any given night. They could put up 5 goals against you, or they could allow 6 goals that night, you know? So, for Guildford, Glasgow, to be honest, that's the toughest one to predict out of all of them. You just don't know which way this is going to go. I believe they played a game on Free Sports against each other a couple of weeks ago, didn't they? Or at some point in the season they played a game against each other.
Yeah.
And I think Guildford took it. I can't quite remember. But off the top of my head, I think the Guildford Flames took it. What do you think about this matchup? Who do you think's got it?
I have absolutely no clue.
Okay.
Don't know. Do not know.
I think that's fair. I think that's absolutely fair. But have you got a piece of paper on you, Chris?
Yes, but no pen.
I need a pen. I want to write down our predictions for the rest of the playoffs.
Oh, I'll do it. I'll do it as a note on my phone. Then I'll write it on after the stream.
Okay, fair enough. Andy, thank you for the super chat, by the way. Regarding merchandise, I'll talk about it at the end of the stream, if that's okay. I just want to, or after this section, I just want to make sure I round this section up before I move on to stuff.
Yeah,
I am
because
reading your guys'
it's already
comments.
20 to 9. We're running behind.
Exactly. Like I am reading your guys' comments. Don't get me wrong. But we've had a fair amount to talk about this week. So with it being the end of the season and everything, so we've only got a few small bits to talk about within the rest of the league. So this is the last big thing. So yeah. Okay. So Chris, predictions for quarterfinals.
We're only doing the quarters.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's start with the quarterfinals.
Oh, okay.
So, Belfast, Coventry. Who you got?
Belfast.
Okay. I'm going to go with you on that with Belfast as well.
Okay, hang on. Yeah.
Fine,
Okay.
yeah,
Right.
no
You're
worries.
going Belfast as well. Right. Cardiff, Sheffield.
Cardiff, Sheffield. Who you got?
I've got Cardiff.
Cardiff. Part of me wants to say Sheffield, though. I don't know. I really don't know with this one. You know what? For the sake of two-sidedness, I'll go Sheffield for this one. I do think it's going to be Cardiff. Like, a little bit more of me thinks it's going to be Cardiff. But just to mix it up a little bit, I'll go with Sheffield just to make sure that we have some difference at least. Nottingham 5.
Against Fife.
Who are you going to go for?
I've gone with 5.
I'll go Nottingham. I think Nottingham can take it.
Okay. And then obviously Guildford and Glasgow.
I've got to back the Flames. I've got to back the Flames on this one.
Yeah, I went for Guildford as well.
Okay, so we've got 2 the same, 2 different. I think that's a nice mix. And
Okay,
like we said, it wouldn't surprise me if any of those changed at all. If the number 8 seed upset the number 1 seed, wouldn't surprise me. You know?
Okay, so quickly then, your Belfast against Guildford.
Oh, I'd probably go Belfast because they've been pretty good against Guildford this year.
And your Nottingham, Sheffield.
Oh. Sheffield.
Sheffield,
Yeah,
okay.
Sheffield. I would like Nottingham to make the final game, but Sheffield have had... if it was Nottingham-Cardiff, I would have said Nottingham, but because I've gone Sheffield, it's got to be the Steelers. They've been so dominant over the Panthers this entire year.
Okay, well, I've got Belfast over Guildford and Cardiff over Fife.
Okay.
So your final, Belfast-Sheffield.
Belfast-Sheffield. Oh, that would be a good final. Belfast. I've got to go Belfast.
Which would mean Panthers into the Continental Cup.
Yep.
I've got Belfast against Cardiff in my final, and I'm going to go with Cardiff because I think they will upset the Grand Slam.
Okay. I mean, they did win the playoff championships last year, so it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
And plus it means that we've got something slightly different on our bracket, so why not? I mean, I've gone with Belfast in my other predictions, and it worked out for me. So why not?
That's true.
My signing of the year is Rich Chernomaz, so, you know, I've got this.
My prediction for the final is Belfast-Cardiff, which means that it doesn't matter who wins, Panthers are in the Continental Cup.
There you go, perfect. It's the small victories, you know. So yeah, that's the end of our Elite League content. We will now move across the pond to the National Hockey League. I'm not going to go through all of the standings at the moment. I'll just talk about the teams that made the playoffs or have made the playoffs, and the teams in like the bottom 5, just in case you want to know what's going on there. Because, of course, in a week's time, exactly a week today, we have the draft lottery, which I'm very much looking forward to.
Regular season finishes on Saturday night.
Yeah, it's crazy. The playoffs are almost here.
They are.
Like, this season has just gone so quick. Like, I've had.
It really has.
It's
probably because we've been doing this, to be honest.
Yeah, very true, and because I've been making videos like the entire season as well, and seen my channel basically explode, which is awesome. So just before we get onto that, when's the merchandise coming? I've been looking into that. Well, I haven't been looking into that a huge amount, but I've been doing like my initial sort of browsing, as it were. For some of the stuff that people want, I'm not quite sure I'll be able to find the right place to do it. Because people are saying like, oh, I want hockey pucks with your logo on it, which I think is a really cool idea. Like, that's a fantastic merchandise idea. The problem is, I don't really know where I'd be able to go about getting that done. So, I mean, I could get it done here in the UK by a company and pay them a shit ton amount of money. The problem is that the merchandise that people want, it would cost me a lot of money to do, and the amount of people that would want to buy it at this stage of the channel, and this many people that said they either would or said they would but end up wouldn't buying it for whatever reason. I mean, it's your money, do whatever the fuck you want with it. But it just probably wouldn't be financially viable. I am still looking into it when I'm not making videos and sleeping and playing Tropico 6. Like, I'm looking into it at points, you know, so bear with. It's not going to happen anytime soon. So, yeah, Patreon's probably the best place to support the channel. You already do, Andy, so that's not a problem. But, yeah, I'll let you know if anything develops. Or if you have a place that you're like, yeah, this place will get it done for you. I'd prefer it in the US because most of my audience is from the US and that would cut down on their delivery and shipping costs. But, yeah, if you have any places that you think might be able to do it, let me know. Anyway, moving on. NHL. Do you think Zuccarello will re-sign with the Stars or go back to Dallas? I wouldn't mind either way because the Rangers benefit either way. If he re-signs with the Stars, the Rangers get a first-round pick. If he comes back to the Rangers got a second and a third for like a week or so of the regular season of Matt Zuccarello. I mean, he got injured like his first game in, so why not? Anyway, so the Tampa Bay Lightning, of course, clinched the President's Trophy. The Calgary Flames earlier this week clinched the Western Conference. They are the best team in the Western Conference this season with so far 107 points, 50 wins on the season. The Boston Bruins, the Washington Capitals, the Toronto Maple Leafs, the New York Islanders, the San Jose Sharks, the Winnipeg Jets, the St. Louis Blues, the Nashville Predators, and the Vegas Golden Knights have all clinched playoff berths at this moment in time. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So there's 5 playoff spots still up for grabs. So, I mean, for some of these teams, there's all to play for. Either they're on the golf course this summer or they're playing for the Stanley Cup. Let's see what happens. And in terms of the bottom 5 teams, the Ottawa Senators still down at the bottom. 62 points on the year. The LA Kings in 30th. The New Jersey Devils, who beat my Rangers last night, 29th. Buffalo Sabres are 28th. The Detroit Red Wings are 27th. And the New York Rangers are in 26th. So they are the bottom 6th place. So if the draft lottery goes with the statistics, they'll have the 6th overall pick, which isn't bad. I'll take it. It's all right. However, I would like it if they jumped into that top 5 again. They just want to keep winning games. I love it that David Quinn wants the Rangers to keep winning games. I think that's a great mentality, especially at this point in the season where there isn't really anything to play for. But there's part of me that's like, come on, tank for the draft pick. Like, come on. But yeah, Toronto have made the playoffs and they'll probably lose, so sorry, Chris. Now we move on to some contract news that was announced recently, and it was announced a couple of days ago. We're talking 2-3 days ago. The Arizona Coyotes have re-signed defenseman Nick Schmaltz to a 7-year contract. Now, this is quite a big contract for a player that has only played a handful of games for them. Of course, he's been injured for the majority of his stint with the Coyotes so far. He was part of the trade that sent Dylan Strome and Brendan Perlini to the Chicago Blackhawks. They picked up Schmaltz in return, and his 7-year contract holds an average annual value of $5.85 million a season. Now, he had 52 points last season with the Blackhawks. He's been a pretty productive player. He looks like a very strong up-and-coming defenseman in the league, and I think, whilst I'm a bit hesitant on the length of the contract, seeming as he hasn't played a huge amount of games for the team, if things keep trending in the right direction, I think this is a really good signing for the Arizona Coyotes. They've got Ekman Larsson and Schmaltz locked up long term. That could be a good 1-2 punch on the defense for them. Anything you want to add on that, Chris?
Not really. I mean, like you say, I mean, he can perform if he stays healthy, because he did that for the Blackhawks. So it's all about if he stays healthy.
Yeah, and I mean, losing Schmaltz was a pretty big hit to the Blackhawks' defensive core. I mean, they got back Strome and Perlini. Strome has been at least or over a point per game since the trade, playing with his line mate from juniors, Alex DeBrincat, who's a 40-goal scorer, which I was shocked to see. You don't really hear much about Alex DeBrincat, but he's played very well this year. And Brendan Perlini, he's played relatively well. He had a hat-trick for the Blackhawks a couple of weeks ago, so he's doing all right for himself. So moving on, we've got the Bill Masterton Trophy nominations. Now, this trophy, of course, goes to the player that is awarded annually by the Professional Hockey Writers Association to the player who best exemplifies the qualities of perseverance, sportsmanship, and dedication to ice hockey. Now, a player from every single NHL team gets nominated for this one, unlike some of the other awards. And for the most part, most of the players that get nominated are either they're very old but they're still playing pretty well, or they had really bad injuries and didn't play well in the years before, but they've had a resurgence now that they've finally got healthy again. To be honest, Robin Lehner should have this trophy, and you can try and argue with me, but you're wrong. Some of these guys like Zdeno Chara, he's 41 years old, and he's still playing in the league. I mean, yeah, he's old, and he's still good. Okay, fine. Corey Crawford. Corey Crawford is a good one. He's really battled with injuries this season, but since he's come back from his concussions, he's played pretty decent hockey for the team. You've got guys like Andrew Shaw of the Montreal Canadiens, Brendan Smith of the New York Rangers, who is not a good candidate for this trophy. He signed a big $4 million a season contract. He's a healthy scratch most nights because he's not very good, and they've actually converted him to forward for quite a lot of the second half of the season. Yeah, perseverance. Jay Bouwmeester, Matt Cullen, for example, he's really old and he still puts up relatively decent numbers. Brooks Orpik for the Washington Capitals, he's relatively old and still puts up somewhat decent numbers. Like, Tyler Ennis is a good pick for the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's had a resurgent year this year in Toronto. He signed a very low-risk, high-reward contract, and boy, that's worked out for him, hasn't it? Carl Soderberg, I've got to be honest, I think I might show a little bit of bias here because I've read a lot more into Robin Lehner's story and what he's been through these last few years and this last off-season. Considering he's gone through all of that stuff off the ice, and he's one of the best goaltenders in the National Hockey League this season. Like, I'm not talking like he's put up okay numbers, he's put up respectable numbers. Like, he's one of the top 5 goaltenders in the league this year. Top 5, top 10. Like, he's been dominant. So, I don't expect you to go through all of the different nominations and say what you think, Chris, but is there anybody that you think has jumped out that you think this person needs to win it?
No, not really. I think it's one of these, there's no, obviously because it's a subjective thing, it's what the people think. There's no, oh, well, this guy got the most goals, so he's won it.
Yeah.
So kind of, no, not really. Just kind of wait and see what they decide.
I'm glad that you agree that it should be Robin Lehner. Awesome. Right, moving on. We've got just a couple of really small things to go over now, just 2 small things. So the Kraft Hockeyville USA announced its winner recently, a couple of days ago. For those of you who don't know what this is a yearly tournament or a yearly competition that Kraft host, where essentially people can submit their local rinks that they believe they've shown determination to the sport, they've shown passion for the sport, it's an integral part of their local community, and they basically want to see their local rink get some love for all the stuff that they do that goes unnoticed by either the wider community or the hockey world as a whole. Because, of course, hockey is quite a big sport, especially in Canada. Not every single rink or arena is going to get the attention that they deserve, because that's just the way it works. But what they do here is they give that community's rink the chance to host a NHL preseason game, which I think is really cool. And they also receive $150,000 for rink upgrades, which I think is brilliant, and $10,000 worth of new equipment from the NHL Players Association Goals and Dreams Fund. Now, it was announced that Calumet, Michigan has been named the winner of Hockeyville USA, of Kraft Hockeyville USA 2019. And I've got to be honest, I mean, I don't really know a huge amount about this rink. The only thing I can say about this is, if the Red Wings don't play a preseason game there, then it's a kind of a bit of a dumb move. You know, Michigan, Detroit, do it.
Yeah.
You know, so, yeah, I thought that was really cool. Unless you want to add anything on that, Chris, I'm happy to move on.
Not really, no.
I mean, it's great. I think it's a brilliant competition that they hold every year. Giving some love to some of those smaller communities that, you never know, with this money and with these upgrades that they might never have received, we might see some of the future NHL players come from this rink, you know? All some people need is a chance. And unfortunately, money usually converts into chance. Then just one last small thing that I thought deserved a bit of a pat on the back from us. Alexander Ovechkin scored his 50th goal in a season, in an NHL season, against the... I can't quite remember. Doesn't matter. He scored it. He scored his 50th goal of the season for the 8th time in his career. Like, if you talk about dominant goal scorers in the league, like, people automatically think Mike Bossy and Alexander Ovechkin. And Alexander Ovechkin has pretty much surpassed Mike Bossy's... he has surpassed Mike Bossy's consecutive 50-goal seasons. He either did that with his 7th, or he tied it with his 7th. I can't quite remember. But yeah, he scored 50 goals for the 8th time in his career, and the first time since the 15-16 campaign. So a 33-year-old Alexander Ovechkin, he hasn't done this in about 4 years, 3-4 years. Ovechkin is just the 4th player to score 50 goals at this age, or older. Wow. The last to do it was Jaromir Jagr during the 05-06 season. I mean, to be put up with the likes of Jaromir Jagr. He scored it against the Tampa Bay Lightning. So he scored it against the most dominant team in the league. Like, if that doesn't make it feel that little bit better, like, that's just incredible. He's the 3rd player in NHL history with 8 50-goal seasons. Like, that's just incredible. Like, when you think of the sort of players that he's on a list with, I mean, you've got to be thinking Gretzky, Lemieux. I can't think of the 3rd one. Who would the 3rd one be on that list? I would imagine something like Gordie Howe or maybe Mike Bossy, but I feel like he's had less. I think he had 6 or 7. I can't quite remember, but Alexander Ovechkin, 33 years old. He won the Stanley Cup last season. Everybody thought that, he was basically getting shit-faced every night with the Stanley Cup for about 2 weeks, which was so fascinating to see on NHL's Twitter. But he's managed to come and have the best season that he's had since the lockout-shortened 12-13 season. His best points per game pace in, we're talking like half a decade, at least. That's pretty incredible. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I think if you look at the stats more closely, I'm sure the seasons he didn't get 50 goals, he was probably still close.
Oh, yeah. Most of them he had like between 40 and 45, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, so it's just to be, so dominant for so long in terms of goal scoring is just great, and something that you should be revising for the end of season quiz.
Oh, okay. I'll keep that in mind. So yeah, Chris has decided he wants to do an end of season quiz, sort of like the finale of the podcast for this year. And he's coming up with some questions, and I think it'll be quite a fun one to do. I think it'll be a nice way to finish off the series.
Yeah,
for the year.
I'm hoping so. Like I said before we came on the stream, they range from relatively all right to absolutely horrific.
I can't wait. So now we move on to just sort of some little bits of news that I want to mention. Of course, the KHL playoffs are underway. The conference finals are taking place. None of you care, but I do, so we're talking about it. CSKA Moscow and SKA St. Petersburg are going up against each other in the Western Conference final for the second straight year. Another piece of news, right? I was in my local supermarket last night, getting some food, as one does. I saw somebody wearing an SKA St. Petersburg top. In my local supermarket, in rural England, I see somebody else. I'm usually that guy. And I saw somebody
Are you sure
else.
It wasn't a mirror?
I saw somebody else being me. No, I legit saw the exact logo of SKA St. Petersburg, and I was like, what the fuck? I wanted to be like, what the... Are you from Russia? Like, what's going on? But no, I didn't get the chance. He ran off quickly. He probably saw me. So CSKA Moscow are currently leading SKA St. Petersburg 2-1. The series will be game 4 tomorrow. Moscow went 2-0 up, playing at home, and then the series has moved to the Ice Palace in St. Petersburg. SKA got the first game in St. Petersburg, so they have the chance to tie it at home, and then it becomes a 3-game series. What happens there? And on the flip side, in the Eastern Conference, the Game 3 ended an hour or so ago today, and Salavat Yuleyev managed to get a game back. So Avangard Omsk are only 1 game up in the series, similar to Moscow. 2-1 series lead there, with the third game of the series being in Salavat, and them getting the win. So, yeah, it's going to be a very, very interesting end to this. I would not be surprised if Moscow took it. I hope they don't, because I want to see St. Petersburg in the Gagarin Cup finals, because Moscow had their chance last year and they bottled it against Bars Kazan, so you know. And on the flip side, Salavat Yuleyev have been a consistent KHL playoff producer, but it would be nice to see Avangard there, you know? Who knows? That's the beauty of the playoffs, you can never quite tell. Then we have some rather sad news, actually, coming out of women's hockey. The CWHL, the Canadian Women's Hockey League, has unfortunately announced only 2 days ago that it is discontinuing its operations. So there is a press release on their website which reads, "The Board of Directors of the Canadian Women's Hockey League, the CWHL, has made the decision to discontinue operations effective May 1st, 2019. While the on-ice hockey is exceptional, and people that I know that have been to the games have really enjoyed it, the business model has proven to be economically unsustainable. New management, led by Jana Hefford and the new board, put in place in summer and fall 2018 respectively, have proactively worked with our contract staff, players, general managers, industry partners, and corporate sponsors to establish an adequate revenue base, good governance, and high-quality hockey on the ice." Bye, Chris. "Unfortunately, the business model that has been the foundation of the league is not sustainable financially. Founded in 2007 by players and members of the community, the league's mandate was to grow the sport of women's hockey, and to that extent it has more than achieved its goal," which I agree with. Last week, 175,000 fans tuned in to watch the 12th edition of the Clarkson Cup, a new record for viewership, and the game delivered. The Calgary Inferno won that, by the way, just in case you were wondering. Women's hockey is fast, skilled, and generally high-scoring, making for excellent entertainment. We thank our fans for cheering on their favourite player and favourite teams, our sponsors for helping fund the growth of women's hockey, and our partnerships with the NHL Players Association, the Montreal Canadiens, the Toronto Maple Leafs, and the Calgary Flames. We would like to acknowledge the management and players of Team Kunlun Red Star of China for their commitment to the CWHL and growth of women's hockey in China, and the Ontario Women's Hockey Association, Hockey Canada, and the NHL for their support. The contract staff, contractors, coaches, and athletes of the CWHL are an inspiration to women around the world, and under Jana Hefford's leadership this season, we have seen new levels of success, new energy, and credibility to the game. And that's where the press release ends. It's a shame. It's a shame that a league that looked like it was going in the right way has shut down its doors. However, this does bring up the question. Of course, we have the National Women's Hockey League and the Canadian Women's Hockey League. A lot of people, especially within the sport, are calling for the two leagues to come together to make the National Women's Hockey League, which is basically the female version of the NHL, which you could argue that with this move is happening or could be happening in the works. There hasn't been anything to suggest that just yet, so don't get your hopes up if you're a big women's hockey fan. But like Andy said, the NHL looks like they're supporting the NWHL a lot more going forwards. And from what I've heard through the grapevine and a couple of articles on the from the Hockey News and things like that, the CWHL, I think, they were the group that were sort of unwilling to budge on creating a more unified women's hockey league. So the fact that they've ceased operations might be that they're finally caving in on this, or that they're just going, look, if you're going to try and bully us into this, we're just going to cease operations. You're not going to have any jobs. And maybe with obviously the case that they're not financially viable at the moment. So anything you want to add on the CWHL, Chris?
Yeah, I mean it's sad when we get sad when a team is in trouble, as we've had with the NIHL this year. When a league goes, I mean that's even worse. But I think if they do come together into the NWHL, then it would be better to have one unified, strong league than two leagues that almost are kind of competing against each other, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. Andy mentions in the chat, thank you for this, Andy, by the way, the NWHL is supposedly adding the Montreal and the Toronto teams into their league. Apparently it was just announced. I don't have any clarification on that. I can double check that, but that would be really awesome. I mean, the CWHL is folding, but if the NWHL can pick up some of those teams and expand where their audience lies, I think that's a really good idea. I think that makes the most sense. Yes, so this is from Emily Kaplan, who is verified on Twitter, so she must have some sort of relevance. The NWHL board has approved investments in 2 Canadian markets. League expects to have teams in Toronto and Montreal this upcoming season. The NWHL will now have 7 teams. So that's pretty cool. In addition, Danny Rylan, who I believe is I would imagine is the commissioner of the NWHL, met with Gary Bettman yesterday. The NHL has agreed to significantly up its contribution to the NWHL. The NHL is now one of the NWHL's biggest financial sponsors. So that's really good news. I mean, we could see now that other teams will follow before the start of next season, which would be great. So it looks like people finally might be getting what they've wanted, and that is a more unified women's hockey league throughout North America, which would be great. So, brilliant. Well played by the NWHL. I mean, strike while the iron's hot. Pick up those teams before they go completely into disarray. You've still got players on that roster with contracts. Do it. Why not? Yeah, so that's pretty much the end of the news. We don't really have anything to say regarding Brits abroad. Kirk's Corner, his team was eliminated in the playoffs in 5 games, I believe, to the Oshawa Generals.
He didn't get any points.
Yeah,
he's done now. He'll come to Great Britain for the World Championships.
The problem was Kirky was quite invisible for the majority of those playoffs. He didn't really seem to get going. I think now's a really good time to open up audience questions. Last call. So if you have any questions you want to ask about the channel as a whole, any topics that we went over in previous previous topics, do let us know. We've been going for about an hour and a half, so we can go for about 10 minutes. We've got some questions or so. Just to let you know what's happening on the channel this week, I've got a video hopefully going up tomorrow. So yeah, it took me ages to record the audio today because my power went out midway through the recording, which wasn't very helpful at all. I'd been I'm an absolute perfectionist when I try and record audio, right? So if I notice something's gone wrong, I have to do it again. Like, I'm really awful with that, especially if I'm like in the first minute or so. I'll like delete the recording, start again, which it's so annoying, but I just want it to be as perfect as possible. Yeah, I'd been spending the last half an hour trying to get through the first like 2 minutes of the audio for that video. And then midway through, I'm like, oh, I'm finally on a roll here. Power goes out. I'm like, oh, fuck it. You know, just like, of all the times for it to happen, it happened then. But luckily, I needed to walk the dog anyway. And the power was back on by the time I got home. So that was quite helpful. So I managed to record it again, which was awesome. So yeah, I'll just clarify for you, Andy, regarding merchandise. I really like the suggestions that some people have put in. Like, for example, a hockey puck with the channel logo on it. I think that would be really cool. The problem is finding a place that will do it for a decent price. Because I'm still quite a relatively small channel. I mean, I've seen exponential growth over the last few months or so. Basically, since the end, like December 2018 up until now, my channel has like quadrupled in size. So yeah, I mean, whilst things are going really well on that front, the amount of people that would be interested in merch is still very, very small. That's why I put out the initial sort of feelers in the polls on my channel, just to sort of see what the response would be. And it was kind of what I expected. Most people a bit hesitant. They want to know what the merchandise is, and rightly so. I don't blame those people for voting that. And others basically saying, oh, I'm not really that interested, or you're not really a big enough channel to be able to, or that you should offer that yet. And I kind of agree with that, you know. Like, I agree. I'm looking into it. It's just with some of the requests that people have made, they're quite specific, like, I want this and I'm not really that interested in buying anything else. I've got to kind of try and weigh up the amount of people that would buy the stuff that I would offer, and I want it to be a decent quality, and I want it to be quite cheap, but it's got to be financially viable. I'd love to be able to offer it out to the half a dozen, 2 dozen people that would want to buy it, or, I mean, if you want to say highballing it, like 100 people that would buy my merch. But if I end up making a loss on it, I don't really make a huge amount on YouTube anyway at the moment, so I'm not sure it'd be the right thing to do. I'm looking into it. Just be patient. I'm doing gradual bits of research as I go along. But if you know of anybody that, or any companies, primarily in the US, that would be good for doing this sort of stuff, I'd rather use a US-based company because the majority of my audience is from the US, and that would mean a smaller amount of a cheaper shipping for you guys. Of course, we've got the big issue that I'm in the UK. Quite a lot of you are in North America. So whether you buy it from here or... so whether you're from the UK buying it from the US or from the US buying it from the UK, it's going to cost you a fair amount and take a while to get there, which is a shame. But I'm looking into it. Yeah, feel free to send me a company that you think might be interested in, Andy. There's also Streamlabs. They offer merch, which I could look into. I did open that up before, back when my channel was a lot smaller. And looking back at it now, it's like, yeah, why did you do that? But they had things like hoodies and hats and mugs and things like that. So I could do that if you guys want it. I believe they have distribution places in several areas. I can't guarantee the quality of it, but I do have some things set up on that merch site. So if you guys wanted to look at that, I could go into it. And the last thing I will mention is I've got a Discord now. If you have Discord and you want to join my server, check out the latest community post that I made. You should be able to see it there. There's a really cool post there, and I've got a Patreon only server that only my lovely patrons can talk in, and we can chat. I like to be a little bit more hands-on on that one. So yeah. And also, now that we've hit 10 patrons, I'm going to be doing a Patreon-only live stream at some point this month. I'm going to ask you guys on the Discord at some point when the best time to do that is, because I want to make sure as many of you are there to watch it as possible. So, yeah. Got time for maybe one more question or something like that? I'd buy a hat for my fat head. Oh, God. I have so many hats. When I went to Canada last summer, I bought, like, 5 hockey hats. I got, like, 2 Habs hats, a Hockey Canada hat, I think I've got like a dozen hats now. Most of them are snapbacks. Because, you know, I'm a proper cool kid and I have to wear it backwards. Because I'm edgy like that. I'm wearing my Panthers one at the moment. So, yeah, that's pretty cool. So, yeah, if you've got another question, we've got time for one more maybe. We'll hopefully be back on Monday next week. If Chris decides to turn up on Monday next week.
Yes, I'll be here on Monday.
He pulled the biggest April Fool's joke of them all, ladies and gents. He was like, oh, by the way, I'm not here on Monday. I was like, oh, fuck. You need a headset like Chris. Now I'm using my lovely Blue Yeti microphone.
This is just my commentary headset.
Yeah, it's a commentary headset. I've got my lovely Blue Yeti microphone. If you can see it here. There it is. With got 2 pop filters. Doesn't help some of the P sounds sometimes. And I think I've just woken up my dog by doing that, so sorry. Yeah, I've had my dog sitting here listening to me do the podcast this week, which is nice. Can't complain really, can you? It's worse ways to spend your Tuesday evening, innit? Sitting here chatting shit about the Elite League. Got some stuff. Okay. Yeah, so, yeah, unless there's any more questions, I think it's a good time to finish the podcast.
Yep.
Yeah, I think we'll finish there. So, thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you have enjoyed. We'll see you next week, if Chris decides to turn up.
Oh, give it a rest.
I should have another video going out tomorrow, and hopefully a Pee-wee to Pro going out on Friday. I'm doing them every Friday. People are like, upload them every week or every day. It's like, no. Because I would want to kill myself by the end of it. I love playing it, but in moderation, you know? It's one of those games. It's a hockey game. I get bored of playing sports games after like 2 hours.
You know, because you're just playing games, and it doesn't feel like there's any progression. You're just playing game after game after game.
Kind of the exact same thing with a slight variation, which isn't the most interesting. I don't really have the best attention span, I think. But I mean, I'll give it 2.5 hours. I think that's fair. So yeah, should have a couple of videos going out. Check out for a story video tomorrow. I really like this story. It's one that most people might not know. I didn't really know, but I've had it on my list of stuff to do for like the past half a year. So I've really wanted to make a video on this one for a while. But yeah, thank you very much for watching, guys. Hope you've enjoyed. Check out my Discord. Check out Patreon if you want to get a shout out at the end of future videos. But other than that, bye.